right, so like I said, the very first thing that I want you to do on this opener is change the date from yesterday's date to today's date. So I want you to put 2/22. Yesterday we took notes on converting decimals, fractions, and percents. So I want you to use those notes to help you complete today's opener. So the first conversion that we're going to do is changing a fraction to a decimal. So as we go through this, if I call on you, I want you to tell me how you're going to do it, and then I want you to tell me the answer. So to change a fraction to a decimal, Devante, how do I change a fraction to a decimal? Okay, so I'm going to take the numerator and divide it by the denominator. So 3 divided by 16, and what do you end up getting? $0.1875, correct? Okay, then you're going to box your answer. Now, if you notice, between each step that I did, I put an equal sign. Make sure you're putting your equal signs in between your steps. Now, if I were to ask you to read this number to me, raise your hand if you could read this number to me, not by saying 0.1875. Darius Coleman?
1875.
Close. Somebody help him out. Deontay?
Close. 0.
Nope. You don't have to say the 0 and. Now, if there was like a whole number, like a 1, 2, 3, 4, you would have to.
No, hold on. 1/10.
Nope. Try it one more time.
1,875. I don't know.
What place value is this last digit in? 10,000. So you'd say 1,875 10,000s. Okay. Because you look at the place value of the last digit, that's going to be the name of the number. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So we didn't quite discuss this. We did not quite discuss this in our notes yesterday. Yesterday we focused on changing a decimal to a percent, but you followed the exact same rules for changing a whole number to a percent as what you'd change a decimal to a percent. So Kelsey, there are 2 ways that I can do this. What's probably the easiest way for changing this number to a percent? Good. So you're just going to take 8 times 100. And what do you get, Kelsey? 800 what? Percent. Make sure that percent sign's on there. Now, you only have to show your work for getting your answer one way. You can change a number to a percent in 2 different manners. You don't have to show it both ways, but another way you could change this number to a percent is put your 8 there. Now, anytime you have a number without a decimal point, you can put a decimal point behind the number without changing that value of the number. Now, if I'm multiplying by 100, that means I'd move my decimal to the left or the right twice. If you're changing a number to a percent, which way do I move that decimal?
To the right.
To the right. So I'm going to move it 1, 2. So I'm going to fill the 2 spaces with zeros. So my answer would be 800. Would I need to have that decimal behind there since there's no numbers behind the decimal?
No.
No. So it's just going to be 800%. So it's the exact same answer. It's just showing your work in a different manner. Either one of these is acceptable for the quiz as long as you show me you move the decimal points. Okay? The next one. You're changing a decimal to a fraction. So to change a decimal to a fraction, Ayanse, what steps do I need to do? Decimal to a fraction.
Find your place value.
Of the last digit. So what's the place value of that last digit? 10,000. That becomes my numerator or denominator? Denominator, my bottom number. So the place value of the last digit becomes my denominator. Then my numerator is what? Good. Basically, it's the number without the decimal point. Okay? Then anytime we have fractions, what's my last step going to be? Which is going to equal? So type it into your calculator. When you type it into your calculator, Darius, what do we get? 9 over 80. if you did not have a scientific calculator and you had to divide it out by hand, what number could you divide both the numerator and denominator by? What number could this number be reduced by?
Wait, no.
They end in a 0 and a 5. So what are both of these numbers divisible by? 5, yeah. So you could divide it by 5 and keep going that way until you got to 9/80. All right, moving right along. The next one is changing a fraction to a percent. So changing to a fraction to a percent, we're going to have 2 steps we're going to have to complete. Brendan, what are my steps for changing a fraction to a percent? And how do I change that fraction to a decimal? So I'm going to take 15 divided by 16, then I change that decimal to a...
Fraction. A percent.
And how do I change a decimal to a percent? Good. So how I'm going to show my work, I'm just going to show 15 divided by 16 times 100. And when you do that, Brendan, what do you end up with? Like that? A decimal point? So 93.75. What'd you change it to? A percent. So what needs to be on the back of it? Percent sign. Good. So now we have a percent, and we want to change a percent to a decimal. Again, 2 ways that I can do this. Darius Smith, what's one way that I can solve this? Okay, so I'm going to take 5 and divide it by 100. When you do that, what do you get, Darius? Good.
Is today Friday?
No. That's not a question to ask right in the middle of the opener. So then the next one, you have 5%. Another way to show your work is, like I said, you don't have to show it both ways. So if I have 5% and I want to change it to a decimal, I just move my decimal places 2 spots to the left. Now, if I don't have a decimal with my whole number, I can put a decimal behind it without changing the value of that number. Because I'm dividing by 100, that means I'm going to move my decimal to the point to the left twice. So 1, 2, and then I fill in the gap with a 0. So I'll end up with 0.05. Now, you can write your answer like that, but if you go to box it and you cover that decimal point up, I might not be able to see that decimal's there. So it's always good to put in like a placeholder for it still. So put in 0.05. So you end up with the same answer. All right. Last one here, 2% to a fraction. Now, what does percent mean, Jemiah? What does percent mean? It's on your notes. The notes that we took yesterday. Percent means?
Out of 100. Oh, yeah.
Out of 100. So if this is out of 100, to change that percent to a fraction, Jemiah, what are we going to do? So look at your notes. Get the other note sheet out. I know. It's so
Which one? Oh, it's
right? Which one? So look at there where it says percent to a fraction.
Divide.
So percent to a fraction. So what's it say?
Write a fraction with the percent in the numerator and 100 in the denominator.
Okay. So my denominator is going to be 100. And then your percent's going to be the numerator. So what's your numerator? 2. And then fractions are so enjoyable because we now have to reduce. What's 2 and 100 both divisible by? 2. What's 2 divided by 2? 100 divided by 2? And there's your final answer.
That was easy.